I created an NCAA sport. That's crazy, right? To think about that I could create an NCAA sport that looks like this. Yeah. Some of you are clapping, but some of you are doubting me. And that's okay, because Gary doubted me too. Gary was my biggest skeptic, and he ended up being my best friend. And I want to tell you about Gary, but I need to give you a little bit of history first. In 2008, female administrators and coaches from across the country, 6 different universities, came together to create what is now Acrobatics and Tumbling. The premise behind the sport was to create opportunities for women at the collegiate level who had trained in gymnastics, all disciplines, and or cheerleading, because the athletic aspects of cheerleading are tumbling and acrobatics. It was the first sport to be created since basketball in 1891, and the only sport to be created for women by women. Now, in 2003, the University of Maryland made a bold move. They took the all-girl portion of their cheer team off the sideline, gave them scholarship money, and called it a sport. They didn't change anything else. That's all they did. Not only was this bold, it was controversial. People saw this as a cheat to the true spirit of Title IX and gender equity. And to be honest with you, I didn't see it that way at the time. I didn't look at it through that lens until I met Gary a few years later. In 2007, around this time, I am the sports marketing director at Kennesaw State University. I'm also the head cheerleading coach. I was a terrible sideline cheerleading coach. That is a story for another TED Talk. But the women that were on my team, they came there and they cheered on the sideline for other teams. And they competed once a year. But that's not what they wanted. What they wanted was to compete all the time and to be treated and recognized as a student athlete, and that wasn't what was happening. So in that fall of 2007, I decided college athletics is not for me. I did not want to be a college administrator, and this cheerleading coaching gig seemed like a dead end. So I decided the next fall I was going to go to law school. I was going to finish out this year strong, and I was going to law school. But in February of 2008, a colleague came into my office and said, "Fee, did you hear that the University of Oregon is doing what the University of Maryland did with their cheer team?" And I saw this as a sign. One last-ditch effort to be a real college coach. So I set out to put together a proposal. This is what Maryland did, this is what Oregon is doing, and this is what Kennesaw State can do. And if my athletic director said no, I'm headed to law school in the fall. So I just pick up the phone and I call the University of Oregon Athletic Department. That day, the deputy athletic director of the athletic department, Renee Baumgartner, answered the phone. They don't answer the phone. I had no idea who I was talking to. I just started asking questions, and this lady graciously answered my questions for 45 minutes. And at the end of the call, I said, "Hey, could I get your coach's number? I'd just like to talk to them about the transition." And she said, "Oh, Felecia, we haven't hired a coach. We're going to do a national search. As a matter of fact, if this doesn't work out at Kennesaw, you should apply at the University of Oregon." I thanked her, hung up the phone. I had no desire to go to Oregon. I did not know which one it was, if it touched Canada or California. I did not travel much. My next move, as always, for advice was to call my brother. So I call him and I'm telling him the whole story and everything that was going on. And he interrupted me and he goes, "Oh, no. You have to do this. The Grateful Dead played in their stadium." And that was the advice I got. And so I applied. I didn't hear from him for a while, so I just figured they went in a different direction. So I went ahead, full steam ahead to law school, finishing out my year strong, and was at the cheerleading national championship in Florida in April. And after the first day of competition, I found a voice message on my cell phone. "Felecia, it's Renee. I'm in Florida. I just saw your team compete, and I'd like to talk to you about coaching at the University of Oregon." I met with her the next morning, and I knew immediately that I was going to work with her. I knew immediately that we were going to change the world, and I knew immediately that this was going to be big. So I go out for an interview about a week and a half later, and then a couple months after that, I'm trekking across the country with my wiener dogs to coach a sport that did not exist yet. When I got to Oregon, I was not only in culture shock, I was also in hostile territory. It was pretty obvious pretty quickly that many people inside and outside the athletic department did not approve of this new sport. Renee and I knew it couldn't be cheerleading. We knew it had to be different, and I thought I had it all figured out. I was out in the community spreading my ideas, and there was this one voice that was out there tearing it all down. Do you remember Gary? Well, it was Gary. He was my biggest naysayer, and he was an athletic administrator at the University of Oregon, and quite frankly, he frightened me. But I knew what the problem was with Gary. See, he hadn't talked to me yet. He didn't know that I had already figured it all out. And all Gary needed to get the buy-in, all he needed was to talk to me. So I did what any of you guys would do. I set up a meeting with Gary. I went right in his office. I sat right down and I shot first. Gary, why do you hate me? And why do you hate what we're doing? And he says, oh, I don't hate you. I just hate this so-called sport. So I said, okay, why don't you think it's a sport? He answered very quickly and very matter-of-factly, athletes don't wear skirts. I was like, okay, well, tennis? Field hockey? He goes, midriffs. And I went, oh, okay. Gary, we don't have to wear midriff tops. He didn't even respond. He leans forward on his desk. Where are you going to compete? Oh. Well, we're going to compete. There's competitions all across the country. We'll go to several of those a year. He's shaking his head. No. If you're going to be a sport at the University of Oregon, you're going to compete at the University of Oregon. You're not going to go from convention center to convention center. And I was like, okay. I mean, I gave him the solution. We'll hold competitions here. He smiles, leans back in his chair and goes, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. You'll bring 5 teams in. You'll compete for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It'll all be over within a half an hour. That is not an NCAA sport. And I knew he had me. He wasn't all right, but he wasn't all wrong. So I stood up. Before I left his office, I looked at him square in the eye and I said, Gary, I'm going to prove you wrong. This is going to be an NCAA sport. Little did I know that conversation would truly shape the future of the sport. The next day, I jump on an airplane. I'm going to Southern California to recruit. And while I'm on the airplane, I jot down on an airline napkin the outline of what is now the acrobatics and tumbling meet format. All the time, I'm thinking of Gary. What would Gary approve of as a sport? What will he think? Would this say sport to him? The next week, I had a meeting with Nike reps. The Oregon Nike connection is storied. And I was so excited because they had created new uniforms for this new sport. I will admit I was a bit intimidated, a little bit anxious. But I go in, I sit down, and they do this amazing presentation. And then they unveil the most beautiful, thoughtfully designed cheerleading uniforms. And my heart sank because, they were all midriff tops. Yeah. So I took a deep breath and I thought, speak now or hold my peace for 4 years for the redesign, because that's how it works. So I just took a deep breath and I word vomited. Thank you so much for this, but you see, we can't wear this because when people see this, when they see a picture or they see a video or they see us in person, they can't think cheer. They have to think sport. They can't think cheerleader. They have to think athlete. They have to think tough. They have to think traditional, familiar. They have to think relevant. I don't know how long I talked, but you guys, I didn't take a breath. And 2 weeks later, Nike came back with what is now the standard acrobatics and tumbling uniform. The funny thing was, in that very first iteration, the numbers had no significance because the sport didn't exist yet. They do have significance now. Those first iteration of the uniforms, they had gloves built into the sleeves. They had reflectors. I mean, every bit of it, down to the way the jersey was cut, was meant to say athlete, tough, sport, familiar, traditional, to Gary, to the naysayers. We've come quite a long way over the years. In 2008, we were at 6 teams, and now we're at over 50. To put that into perspective for you, every school that adds a sport is 40 plus new opportunities for women to compete at the collegiate level that were not there before. We keep growing, we keep building, and we keep changing lives. Now, it's evolved a little bit over the years, but the sport of acrobatics and tumbling will be voted in January of 2026 as an NCAA championship sport. Yeah, but think about it. That that uniform that those NCAA athletes are going to wear, it was created to change a stereotype, to change a thought process, to get buy-in from the naysayers. That meet format they're going to compete in, it was created on an airline napkin with Gary in mind. This sport has come as far as it has because of a skeptic. And I would like to believe that I was brave to walk into his office that day, but I was not. I was naive. I thought I knew everything I needed to know to build this sport and grow it across the country, and I didn't. But the one thing I was sure of when I walked out of his office is that I was going to show Gary that this skill set could be an NCAA sport. So now I actively seek out a skeptic, because let's face it, the contrarians and the haters in our lives, they really can teach us everything we need to know if we'll just listen. Find someone out there, I always do, someone who's willing to give me real feedback, or honestly just stubborn enough to argue with you, like Gary was. But either way, if you want to cover all bases, if you want to think outside the box, if you want to do something big, seek out a skeptic and ask them to poke holes in your best laid plans. Thank you.